People get called transphobes for saying that actually women as a group exist. People can't actually change sex, however much they'd like to. Their sex still remains important. We've done polling, and it's quite difficult when you do polling to ask people the question, because if you say a trans woman, quite a lot of people think that's a woman who identifies as a man. A trans woman is a man who identifies as a woman, or somebody who perhaps really is a woman trapped in a man's body, or whatever that means. So in their mind, trans woman means basically a woman who had the unfortunate accident of being born male. That sounds crazy, but when you ask the question in polling, you really have to ask it carefully to make sure that people understand what you're asking. But when you ask it carefully, saying a man who identifies as a woman who may or may not have had surgery, should they be allowed into women's changing rooms, showers, sports? Less than 30% say yes.
For some of the reasons that it would matter, let's say if you had been born a man and now you're presenting as a woman, why is it important that I know you were actually a man?
You were born a man and you decided to wear a dress and put makeup on, and now you say you're a woman. In what situations should I go along with that? What situations should I be forced to pretend that you really are a woman? In most situations in life, we don't differentiate legally between how you treat men and how you treat women. You pay them the same, employ them to do the same jobs, but where you have rules that treat men and women differently, they're around fairness in sport, dignity and safety in any situation where people are taking their clothes off, basically, and data. So healthcare, your doctor needs to know whether you're a man or a woman. And even though people know that when looking at you, the data has to be right too, because otherwise, you have algorithms, you have calculations, you have policies, you have risk assessments, which go on what's on paper. It doesn't work to say, of course, everyone knows, but on paper, we're going to say that you're a woman, because sometimes you're making decisions on paper, and those will be the wrong decisions if you're trying to interpret your heart monitor or something like that.
A friend of mine read it was a famous feminist book in the last few years about how a lot of things in life seem to be made for men, like sizes and different things like that. And I suppose if you skew an entire country's statistics by saying, well, no, there are a lot of women who are actually 6'4", and there are, and that's a very basic example, but that will just continue to hurt women, I suppose. Fewer and fewer things will actually be built for women.
Yes, absolutely. The places where that really matters, one of them is around crime. 98% of sexual crimes are done by men. Most of them against women and children, not all of them, but most of them. And so if you skew those statistics by saying there are women with penises who are rapists, there are just very, very few women who undertake sexual crimes. And so you can skew those statistics really, really easily with just a few men.
It is happening, I think, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
A lot of people get offended, I think, a lot of men in particular, with those statistics, and trans people do as well. And they say like, oh, so you're saying that we're all awful people who would commit these atrocities. But I guess something Helen Joyce was saying when she was on recently was just, well, we have laws for the extremes. That's why we don't have a law against murder, because most humans are about to commit murder. It's a very, very small, tiny, minuscule number of people who commit murder, I imagine. But we have to have the law for them.
The reason that I spoke up about this is gender wasn't my specialist issue. I was working on tax, but I worked for a think tank, and I was thinking, where are the academics? Where are the people having careful, compassionate, evidence-based discussions about a difficult topic? And the reason they don't is because the whole area has been landmined with offence. One of the reasons why my case was so important was that it forced some of these people to justify why they thought it was unreasonable to say that men who identify as women are the same risk as men. We don't know if they're greater risk or not, but there's no reason to think they're less risk than other men. And therefore, the rules and the safeguards that you have to protect women, to protect fairness, shouldn't be disregarded because you have a class of men who say we're different. We've been down that road before. We used to think priests were different. We used to think scout leaders were different. We used to think gymnastics coaches were different. We've learned through hard-learned lessons that you should never ring fence any group of people, but particularly any group of men, and say they're not a risk. Because even if that group in itself is not a risk, once you've put those rules around them, you then attract the people who want to find those loopholes. You can say it as politely as you like and as carefully as you like, and you'll still be called a transphobe. If somebody's attacking people in the street or have trans people lose their livelihood, that's transphobia. But saying in clear language, which is not what people want to hear, that someone is a man, that's what gets called transphobia.
That's right. I feel like we could still say, okay, well, this person's a transphobe because, as you say, they're trying to prevent somebody who represents as trans from doing their work, or they throw stuff at them in the street, or they just say, I hate those people because of who they are, or whatever. That to me seems like that's where a transphobe is. So the idea that you or J.K. Rowling might be just seems absurd.
Right. But I mean, I read a definition of transphobia that says even having that conversation, the conversation that says, well, this is transphobia and this isn't, that in itself is transphobia.
Bloody hell. Well, then everyone is. What is ContraPoints finding transphobic in J.K. Rowling's tweets and your tweets?
Ultimately, it's about women saying no. That's what transphobic means. And it, as politely as you can say it, you're still saying no. And so transphobia is used as a weapon against women being able to say no, and against institutions being able to say, we have clear rules and no means no. It's as simple as that.
Are there any facts or arguments that can convince you that men, for all intents and purposes, can be women, intersex, clownfish? Those are the ones that are brought up usually.
Everyone has a mother and a father, whether those are the people that brought you up or not. Everyone biologically has a mother or a father. Everyone's mother is female. Mm-hmm. Everyone's father is male. And that goes back, to the whole history of humankind. You can't get away from that. And then being a mother or not being a mother, being vulnerable to getting pregnant, shapes women's lives. It's not something you can put in a box and say, this is a 9-month thing. This is a lifetime thing. It's a lifetime of a child's thing. And it's what shapes evolution. And that's how I understand the world. There's no getting away from that.
Yeah. Where can people follow you and support you?
My organisation is Sex Matters, sex-matters.org. It's on Twitter. It's on